In 100 years, we've lost 80% of the nutritional value of vegetables, but we also have had a 3,000% increase in kidney, liver, heart, cancer disease, attention deficit disorder, autism, childhood obesity, allergies, and diabetes. I didn't make those numbers up. Those are real numbers. Do your research. Look it up. 3,000% in a 100-year period while the nutritional level's down 80%. It's not sustainable.
You're listening to the Healthy Parenting Handbook podcast. It's just the thing we all said we needed when we first became parents. I still remember that feeling. Where's the handbook for this? Sometimes I still tease my kids. Oh, my friends, that's on page 57 of the parenting handbook. There is no parenting handbook, but there kind of is now. I'm your host, Katie Kimball from Kids Cook Real Food, and on this podcast, I bring together experts in the fields of health, nutrition, parenting, and more to help you parents get the information you need to raise truly healthy, independent kids. Parenting is the toughest and the most rewarding job in the world. Thank you for joining me to consult this Healthy Parenting Handbook, your guide to raising kids intentionally. Please leave an honest review, especially on Apple Podcasts, so that others can find us. That's super helpful. And I try to bring on such a variety of guests that you think, I got to listen to this show every stinking week. This guest today is so entertaining, so unique, and so filled with knowledge, energy, and enthusiasm that you're just going to enjoy listening to this episode. It's on the long side, but let me tell you, it's going to go quickly. Farmer Lee Jones is a master storyteller and a master gardener, to be sure. Not in the official sense of the word, but he is a master farmer. Farmer Lee Jones is a farmer at the Chef's Garden in Ohio, the farm his family has owned for decades, as you'll hear. They are committed to reviving heirloom vegetables and discovering exciting new varieties, all while telling their stories and farming sustainably. And as you'll hear in the interview, not just sustainably, but regeneratively. So their vegetables are dense with flavor and nutrition. In 2011, Farmer Lee Jones was honored with the James Beard Foundation's award for Who's Who in Food and Beverage. He's spoken across the country as an expert in regenerative agriculture. And he is the host of a new show partnering with Rachael Ray on A&E called The Chef's Garden. He's the author of, or co-author of the book, The Chef's Garden. They are busy, busy people at the Chef's Garden in Ohio, and you can even get a box of their incredible nutrient-dense vegetables shipped to your house in the U.S. Love it, love it, love it. Whether Farmer Lee is roaming the farm or at a black tie event, he's always seen in his iconic outfit, a white shirt with denim overalls and a red bow tie. This interview is such a delight, and I will not hold you back any longer from jumping right in. Farmer Lee Jones is here on the Healthy Parenting Handbook. I'm just thrilled. And if you are listening to this, you're missing out because he's wearing his iconic red bow tie, overalls, white shirt. He's got like 24 beautiful vegetables displayed in front of him. So go watch the YouTube video. It's so gorgeous. If we happen to be in your ear, just imagine the beautiful colors. But Farmer Lee, I'd love to start with your story because your family has such a rich history in farming. But you and your brother have really taken it high tech at the same time, looking backward to traditional growing styles. It's so fascinating. What's the overview of how you got to where you are now?
Desperation.
Yeah, it's an easy answer.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on. We're really excited. And anytime we get to talk about veggies and regenerative agriculture, it's always a special day for us. And to be on the program with you is just a delight. I have done nothing individually. It is a family business. And we were inspired by my father, who I had the privilege of working with for 40 years. For 40 years, every week, 6 days a week, and then church on Sundays together. But all of us work together collectively. We're in an amazing microclimate. We're about 2.9 miles inland from Lake Erie. And Lake Erie is the shallowest of all the Great Lakes. Listeners want to, talk about microclimates. I think it's an interesting thing to learn about, but it is a unique set of circumstances that make a condition somewhat different than the rest of the surrounding area. For example, in the spring, the water temperature will be cool and it'll be uncomfortably cool around that region. We can go 5 miles further south on a day like today and it could be much warmer, 10 degrees warmer. But it also keeps us, when we have a really hard killing frost in the spring, that lake temperature is cool, but it also keeps you from getting extremely cold. You get further out than about 3 miles, and that lake effect really doesn't make much difference. In the fall, in retrospect, that water temperature will warm to about 70 degrees. It'll get warmer than the deeper lakes because there's less of a body of water for it to warm up. But then in the fall, when you get the breezes off of the lake and you get a killing frost, it'll buffer you, and a lot of times it will allow you to go later into the season, but it also allows those vegetables to build some resistance, and it's not so abrupt, and they start to build some strength to be able to handle cooler temperatures. But European settlers, far longer earlier than when we were here, recognized this as an amazing microclimate. The glaciers were extremely heavy as they were melting and moving towards the lake. They ground the soil. The soil that we're on is all old lake bottom soil about 11,000 years ago. It's truly some of the richest soil in the world. More vegetable farmers were in this county than any other county in the world. Now you can say, wait a minute. There are counties in California that are 100% agriculture, from the north to the south to the east to the west. And it's true. But the farms are 10 to 30,000 acres. These were what they were called truck farmers. There were over 330 vegetable farmers in Erie County. And it's from the research, all the research we've been able to find, it's the largest concentration of vegetable growers of any county anywhere in the world. Now, a truck farmer. What in the world is a truck farmer? Well, a truck farmer is a farmer that would grow vegetables and they would take them into the market. We're about an hour away from Cleveland, but the market is entirely different than what you and I know today as a farm market. It was a farm market or a farmer's market, but they would harvest the vegetables, they would wash them, they would pack them, and they would load them on a truck, and they would go into Cleveland. I can remember going with my dad when I was knee-high to a duck and going, and my job was to keep my dad awake because, see, they had harvested all day and then packed, and sometimes it was 11 o'clock at night before we finished getting the trucks loaded, and then we would drive in. But you met. Think about, I would challenge you, and I would challenge all the listeners that are listening. Think about the family-owned grocery stores that existed in your community, wherever you grew up, that were there when you were a kid that are no longer there. It's kind of the Walmart syndrome, but it really happened years ago. It's like the hardware stores, the mom-and-pop hardware stores that can't compete, and they went out of business. And the same thing ultimately happened with those truck farmers. But for a period of time, they had the very thing that we desire today, which is regional growth, regional distribution. Local is a word that is a hot buzzword, but a regional distribution. So there were hundreds of grocery stores, individual family-owned grocery stores. And Cleveland is such a great example of the whole United States. How it's so amazing. And I think one of the things that makes Cleveland such a great area is the ethnic diversity. All of these different folks came from all over the world to come to America to be able to start over again. And each one of those pockets of ethnic diversity had their own grocery stores, and they had certain things that they liked to eat from the home country. And so they built relationships with those farmers, and the farmers learned that with the Polish or the Slovakian or the Hungarian or the Jewish or Italian, and you grew for those specific grocery stores. And it was really pretty kind of cool. But things changed, didn't they? Roads and refrigeration came along. And yes, there were roads and there was some refrigeration, but they had not improved to the point where you had outside competition up until about 1950. Roads and refrigeration had not developed to the point where the outside competition was coming. It would take 2 weeks to put a load of iceberg lettuce on a truck and get it across the country, and it wasn't any good by the time it got here because the refrigeration wasn't. Before that, they were trying to bring the stuff on rail cars, and they did some experimentation with trying to ice the rail cars down, and it didn't work very effectively. But as the roads and refrigeration got better, one by one, then outside competition from Arizona, from Georgia, from the Carolinas, from Florida, from California, from New Mexico, places that had warmer growing regions and they had longer seasons. And so one by one, the small family farms in this county, like all over America, were pushed out. And so we lost that regional distribution. The very thing that we're seeking today, we had right in our graph back 60 years ago, and we lost that. The fellow that my dad went to work for, in fact, on this farm, recognized that outside competition was coming. That's when we had the institution. Maybe some of the listeners remember A&P, Kroger, Big Bear, Pick and Pay, Fisher Bosco, chain grocery stores that could buy for 100 or 150 or 300 stores. And so you needed the volume to be able to handle that. So Mr. Nichols invested in hydrocooling, packaging, palletization, sorting, sizing. He bought from 60 growers from this area, and they packed all under one label and were able to sell to those grocery stores. And my dad started work for him at 14 years old. My dad ended up buying the farm from him. Mr. Nichols had no children that wanted to take over the farm. By the time my dad and mom took the farm over, the growers from this area had been reduced down to about 15 or 20. So my dad continued to increase his production of fresh market vegetable. When I was 15 or 16, my dad was growing about 1,200 acres of fresh market vegetable. And here's the way it works. You had a problem, you had a disease on a plant, you had a disease or an insect on that plant that was eating it, and you sent a sample to the university, and then the university would send you back what chemical to use to get rid of that. Follow the money. The universities all seem to be financially strapped somehow. And so the pharmaceuticals and the chemical companies will give them a check for $10 million and say, here's a grant. We'd like you to do research to be able to help the farmers. And by the way, the research needs to include the chemicals that we supply. So we want you to do this research. So you would send a sample of something that had a disease or an insect, and they would give you a recommendation back. Here's the chemical, or here's what you put on this to get rid of it. It's much like our Western culture of medicine. You go to the doctor, you have a strep throat. The doctor gives you a penicillin, a amoxicillin, a viacillin, and then you come back a year later and you do it again, and he does it again. And now we can't take penicillin because we've been treated with penicillin for so long that our bodies are building resistance to it.
So when that was happening, when that was the give and take, was your dad sort of following the process at first? Did he feel any internal friction with doing what the university told him to do?
He felt like something wasn't right about it, but he followed the system. He went to the university. This is what they were teaching. This is the way you did it. But it never felt quite right. You were pouring synthetic fertilizers to it. He had some successful years. In 1978, before you were born, he had really successful years. He invested all the money back into the business. I don't know if you remember, but we call it the Jimmy Carter days in the late 70s and early 80s. The economy got all turned upside down in the United States. Interest rates hit 22%. We were borrowing money for 22% and from the banks. And then we were selling to these grocery stores that would pay you in 180 days with no interest. And so that alone was kind of a path to failure. But then we had a hailstorm, and the hailstorm wiped out all the crops, and we couldn't repay the loans. And at 19 years old, I stood about 40 feet from right where I'm sitting right now and watched them auction my mother's car off, the home that we were living in. The entire farm, all the land, all the tractors. We literally crawled away from that. And as devastating as that was, and I'm not trying to give you a pity story, I think that it's important to understand when the very first question you asked me, how did we evolve to where we are today? And it was through mere desperation, because we were flat broke. We were desperate for a way to be able to survive in agriculture. We went down the road and started over on 6 acres. And we started going to farmers markets, which were at a historic low in the early 80s. And there's a whole reason and an explanation and a story for that. We became a 2-income households. Both people were working away from the home. And so the convenience foods had their foot in. And my mother's a terrible cook.
Uh-oh.
She was then. She is now.
Oh, no.
And she'll admit it. And my grandmother was an amazing cook. But my grandma stayed home. Now, she worked just as hard as if she would have worked away from home, but it was tending the household chores and feeding the family and making sure that the family ate right. Mom was working a job away from the farm and TV dinners. Remember those?
I do. Yes,
yeah.
vaguely.
Yeah.
So who had the vision? Because you shifted from grocery to a little bit farm market, but chefs became sort of the holy grail that resurrected the farm. Who figured out that chefs might want something different?
Well, chefs did. And what I mean by that is we started back at farmers markets because it was the only place we knew to start. Because you see, we had to put something in the ground and we had to turn it into cash in about 30 days. You planted it, things like greens and lettuces and radishes, and you could turn those because there was no money. And I could tell you some stories of survival that you just wouldn't even believe. But we started back at these farmers markets, and a chef came to me and said, look, I trained in Europe. The food in America is grown for the tons per acre, how well it will travel, the disease resistance. And this has limited our diversity in America. We need more diversity in our diets and in the vegetables that we consume. And we keep narrowing that and narrowing that. I would challenge you to find out, like, for example, sweet potatoes in the grocery store. You probably see 3 or 4 varieties over and over. There are hundreds of varieties of sweet potatoes, but we keep limiting that because they produce the most tons per acre, because they have the most disease resistance, because they'll ship the best. And that's the deciding factor. And here's a chef saying, I trained in Europe and we had all these wonderful varieties and we weren't using chemicals and we weren't using synthetic fertilizers and we were growing regeneratively. They might not have been calling it regeneratively. You know, it's organic. Is it regenerative? Is it without chemical? Whatever you want to call it. But they had flavor in the vegetables and they came here and it wasn't there. And we were desperate for a way to be able to survive in agriculture. They said, if you would grow for the right variety, grow for the flavor, grow without chemical, we believe that there would be enough chefs in America to support you. Now, you got to understand, we were so desperate, we grabbed around that chef's ankles by both hands and said, okay, teach us.
What a blessing, that conversation. Oh my goodness, changed everything.
Well, absolutely. Well, here's how I put it. God had a different plan for us. Some of us, it takes a bigger 2x4 to thump us than others. Some learn easy. We didn't learn so easy. It took a pretty good thump. And that meant losing everything to redirect us.
I tell my kids and teens all the time that we have to learn from failure and figure out, right, what God is telling us and fail forward. So for those of us who, for whom you're moving into a new vocabulary when you say regenerative farming, I can't even say it, regenerative farming, you didn't know what that was and you learned. So tell us kind of from the ground up, what does that mean?
What those chefs were telling us, grow for flavor, grow it without chemical, do it the right way, that reminded my father of the generation before. He was old enough to have seen the past, where a large farm was 100 acres, and a third of that was in cover crops, a third of that was in crops for taking to market, and a third of it was in pasture. And then they rotated it, and then the next year they did it again. Well, you can go back further than that. You can go back to biblical times in the Old Testament. Harvest fruit for 6 years. On the 7th year, let the fruit fall to the ground and it composted, and they had an abundant harvest on the 8th year. So these weren't new, but we started looking at agricultural books that were 100, 150, 200 years old. Here's what's amazing. 100 years ago, the nutritional levels in vegetables were 80% higher than they are today. That's without AI. That's without synthetic fertilizers. That's without all the brilliance that we have and all the intelligent minds that we have in this world today. 100 years ago, the nutritional level in vegetables is 80% higher. Here's this chance to be able to rethink. Hit the easy button. It wasn't easy, but hit the reset button and go back and look at the way that they were farming. What did we miss? And so that was really the beginning of us looking at this differently, growing for the flavor, growing without the chemical, and doing it the right way. Because, see, those farmers were really doing something pretty amazing. Not only was the nutritional level 80% higher, in 100 years we've lost 80% of the nutritional value in vegetables, but we also have had a 3,000% increase in kidney, liver, heart, cancer disease, attention deficit disorder, autism, childhood obesity, allergies, and diabetes. I didn't make those numbers up. Those are real numbers. Do your research. Look it up. 3,000% in a 100-year period while the nutritional level's down 80%. It's not sustainable. It's sustainable. This is really kind of one of the differences. The buzzword in agriculture used to be a sustainable farm. You want to be a sustainable farm. When I think about sustainable, I was this overweight, fat kid, and all the way through, I was weighed too darn much. I hated the day where we had to all go do chin-ups. And I couldn't do a pull-up. And there would be kids that could do them, and I would grab the bar, and I would hang on as long as I could before my fingers would start and slip off of the bar, and I would fall down. It's like, yep, well, you didn't do any. But I hung onto the bar for 30 seconds. Yeah. I sustained for 30 seconds. Sustaining doesn't work. Regenerative. You're rebuilding. You're regrowing. You're building the people. You're rebuilding the land. You're rebuilding the soil. We have a saying, healthy soil, healthy vegetables, healthy people, healthy environment. And that's really the crux of what we're trying to do here on the farm at the Chef's Garden. And it's all inclusive.
It's amazing to hear. Those statistics are frightening. Of course. And the fact, we can say now, why are we sicker, even if it's a family who's eating vegetables? Well, the vegetables aren't as good as they were. And I think what you're saying is it's because of soil health. Can you talk a little bit about how that rotation, that sort of 3-part rotation that you talked about, that is regenerative farming and also old-fashioned farming, is different from the air quotes brilliant methods of large-scale farming that we are seeing today? What's happening to the soil within that style of farming?
Well, first of all, I would say it's not the farmer's fault. They're trapped in a model,
right,
that says keep your costs as low as possible, produce as many tons per acre as you can, and you might stay in business. Of course, the pharmaceutical and chemical companies recognize the model that they're in, and they can help the farmers by being more efficient. Here's the reality. We produce food. As it relates to our income, I'll qualify it by saying that. As it relates to our income, we produce food cheaper than any other country in the world. You can go to struggling countries, third world countries, and they're working literally around the clock to feed themselves, much less having the automobile of their choice or the home of their choice or sending their children to the schools of their choice, because they're working round the clock just to put food on the table to sustain by the day. So as it relates to our income, we produce food cheaper than any other country in the world, yet we have the highest health care. There's a real conundrum there. And so chemical companies recognize that they could produce food cheaper. It used to be that a farmer cultivated. That meant that, well, I'm sure all the listeners, if they have a garden, they've used a hoe, which is the blade on the end of the stick, and you go along and you eradicate the weeds. Well, then at some point when we invented tractors, they attached hoes, in essence, to the tractor so they could drive down through the rows. You would leave the row of the thing that you were trying to save, but then the shovels would go in between those rows and eradicate the weeds, because the weeds competed for the water, the moisture, and the light, and so you wanted those weeds out. Well, that means the tractor's got to drive down through and a person's got to drive down through, and it's cost. So the chemical companies recognize that they can genetically modify the seeds so that they can spray when they plant. So it's efficient. They plant it and they spray it at the same time, so it's one time through, and they never have to cultivate. So you reduce the number of times through, because the spray kills all plants that are not genetically modified. So everything else is dead, so you don't have the increased cost of managing those weeds. They told farmers that when it hit the earth's surface that it dissipated and it was done. It was a lie. They knew it was a lie. It kills the biology and the biodiversity in the soil. So when they put the fertilizer on and the biodiversity and the biology isn't there to break that food down into a form that the plant recognizes and can pick up, nutritional levels go down. So there you have it. And it continues to, and then you get a heavy rain and it washes off of the field and it goes into the creek and into the river and out to the lake. And guess what? Lake Erie is really shallow. We talked about it earlier because it's the shallowest of all the Great Lakes. It's the warmest. You're fertilizing the seaweed. It's the algal bloom. We grow some amazing algal bloom in Erie County. In the Western Basin, where it's the shallowest, we're growing so much algal bloom that it's plugging the water lines up and it's causing some real problems. So it's all running off. So when you quit using the chemicals, and we actually have stopped plowing because you're disrupting that biology and the biodiversity, and we're finding ways to be able to plant into cover crops when you allow that biology. And the good news is that the soil will respond and rebound from good treatment. It's
good.
Just like our human bodies, they'll respond. It doesn't take long. If we start eating right and exercising and doing what we know we should, our bodies will try it like heck to recover. And so that's the good news. And the soil will do the same thing. And if you've got a garden at home, you can do the same thing. You can do a third of it in cover crop and always continue to be putting something back. But you can even plant cover crops and plant your vegetables into the cover crops, and they can cohabitate together. But you're harvesting that energy from the sun, you're feeding the biology then breaks the food down into a form that the plant recognizes, and lo and behold, the nutritional levels go up. It's amazing.
What are some cover crops, and why are they different than just planting tomatoes and cucumbers?
Oh gosh, I'm glad you asked that. That was where I was going next.
Oh good. Sorry I interrupted.
No, it's okay. I'm glad you queued me up for that. Boom. Okay. You heard your parents say this. You've even said it as an adult, and the listeners have said it maybe jokingly, maybe tongue-in-cheek, maybe they thought there was something to it. I need some vitamin D. I'm going to go out and get some sunshine. Was it an excuse just to go outside and get some sunshine? Or did you really believe that there was going to be some vitamin D from that sunshine? Of course, we all know we can get vitamin D from the sunshine. Okay, if you can get your mind around the idea that your body is a receptacle for energy from the sun, then it's not such a far bridge to recognize. And all the adults on here have gone for blood work before. You go and they draw your blood and they find that you're high in iron, low in iron, high in calcium. All the mineral levels that are in your body are the same minerals that are in the soil. If they're deficient in your body, then there's a deficiency someplace else. If they're deficient in the soil, they're going to show up in what you're eating. So what's really cool, we actually have a lab right here on the farm where we're testing nutrient density, nitrate oxides, but we're also testing the mineral deficiencies in the soil. So why is that important to us? Once we identify what those mineral deficiencies are, then we can plant specific. Different types of crops will harvest different types of energy from the sun. It may be clover, alfalfa, buckwheat, rye, vetch, Sudan grass. We do what we call a cocktail blend. A cocktail, if you think about a cocktail, it's a mix of things. It can be a mocktail or a cocktail, but it's a mix of things. And so based on the deficiencies that we find in the soil, then it actually takes us more management time to prepare the blends and manage to grow those cover crops. Now, you don't have a lab. You don't want to send it out. You can send it out. You can use a rye, you can use a vetch, you can use clover, you can use any types of cover crops that you can put in the ground, and in the fall, you can put a rye in and it'll help with the wind erosion, but it'll also still capture that energy. It's unbelievable. When we do this methodology of specifically putting the types of cover crops in that are going to help us create the balance. That's really the trick, is getting the balance in the mineral levels. Then we can achieve the highest levels of nutrient density and nitrate oxide. We actually have some product that's testing 150 to 300 times higher than the USDA average. It works. You can do this at home. If you've got a garden, use the cover crops. Let them work together. When you plant the spring crops and you still have the other that you're not going to plant until after frost-free date, plant it to cover crops and then plant through it, or mow it down and put another one in. It's exciting.
It is. I'm tickled that you are using so much high tech, and research to figure out how to do old school farming just in a better way, instead of replacing it with this, like, we thought it was better, but it's actually just scaling bigger and it's killing the soil and it's not healthy for us. It's fascinating. So the cover crops, they're harvesting energy from the sun, putting it into the soil. And then a lot of the vegetables we grow we're taking that energy out of the soil and giving it to us. Did I get that right?
Exactly. And you want to it's like a relationship. You've got to continue to feed it. If it's all just one way, it doesn't work. So it's a constantly giving back. And even between the rows where we used to think needed to be weed free, or with the tomatoes now, we plant an entire 6-foot bed of clover in between those rows of tomatoes. So you're harvesting that energy, the roots go down, they're feeding the tomato's picking that up, we eat it, and lo and behold, it's more nutritious and it tastes better and it's better for the environment. Everybody wins.
That is so amazing. And I keep looking at the produce in front of you, Farmer Lee, and I'm curious because here in Michigan, we're not growing anything and Ohio's not that far. Is your microclimate that different than mine? Or do you have indoor greenhouses? How are you growing so many vegetables right now?
It's not that different. I think that there is a misconception that when you're this far north, that once the November hits or December hits, that it's over until spring. It's not true. I think you have to work in harmony with nature rather than trying to outsmart it, and you have to work a little closer with it. I believe that you can grow the same vegetables in that state up north, that M word. We're Ohio State Buckeyes down here. But anyway, here's a good example. If you can imagine, I'm actually going to be quiet for a second. So I'm going to take this spinach and gather it up, and let's see if you can hear it. We're going to call an spinach audible. All right. Could you hear any of that crunch?
Exceptionally loud, yes.
It's live and it's full of body and health and nutrition, and it's delicious. We grow this outside. We use no artificial heat. We're using solar energy to grow this spinach. It's a cold frame. So we cover it in the fall. It'll go completely dormant where there's nothing covering it. We cover this on a 20-degree day. If you have any sun at all, you can have 55 degrees in there. You harvest the spinach out, and that cold frame is empty. You pick up one end of it, and you drag it over to the next section of spinach. It's completely dormant. You wouldn't think there's anything alive there, but the spinach is there. You cover it, And within a few weeks, lo and behold, you're capturing enough energy and the spinach starts to grow again. It freezes at night, it thaws during the day. It freezes at night, it thaws during the day. It's some of the most amazing spinach you'll ever eat in your life. We call it ice spinach. We actually have a trademark on it, which means absolutely nothing other than something fun to talk about. It tells you that it's something a little bit different. Maybe your listeners are familiar with ice wine. What's ice wine? Ice wine is the grape when it's harvested frozen because the sugar levels are the highest. It's exactly the same with spinach. It's the same with carrots. It's the same with beets. When you get the freezing and thawing, that action that pulls that sugar up through and then it goes back down. It's delicious. If you want to get kids to eat spinach, try this ice spinach. By the way, during the middle of COVID, when the restaurants that were 100% of our business were failing, we opened a nationwide home delivery where people could go online to the chefs-garden.com and be able to order a box delivered right to their homes on their front porch or back porch. Or if you have an Aunt Matilda in Tampa and she has 3 of everything already, it's like, what do you get her at Christmas time? I don't know. Well, let's get her a box of Chef's Garden vegetables and we'll deliver her a subscription. But if you're at home and you've got a garden, you can try it on a small scale. Put a little cold frame. You can use PCV, plastic pipe, and make a little greenhouse, secure it down so you can capture that energy from the sun during the winter. And of course, there are vegetables here. We replicated Grandma's root cellar, where we store the rutabaga and the parsnips and the turnips and the beets and the carrots and the fall squash and all of those things. They're winter vegetables because they're what sustained us through until spring, when the dandelions and the asparagus and the rhubarb and and the fiddlehead ferns and the morels and all those fun things that we can't wait to get our hands on by the end of winter and the first of spring.
You know, my Polish grandma, my Busha, used to wrap cabbage in newspaper and put it in her root cellar. And it would last for a really long time. And you just peel the ugly outer leaves off. Like, people used to have this wisdom. We've lost it. And thank you for reinvigorating it and showing us how to talk to nature and draw from it. So exciting. The entrepreneurialism in your family is incredible. Like, you're on cooking shows, you wrote a book, COVID, sprouted this shipping vegetables business. Has regenerative farming inspired these entrepreneurial ideas, or is that just part of your family and your genes?
I don't think that we called what we were doing regenerative farming. There's a guy by the name of Gabe Brown, went through a similar situation to us, was broke and didn't know it, or broke and did know it and kept going and persevered and quit using the chemicals. If the listeners like to watch documentaries, I would highly recommend one called Kiss the Ground. We're not a part of it, but we believe that it really gives you a good explanation of what happened to the degradation of the soil going back to the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression and how we've arrived at where we are. They predict that we have 60 harvests left if we don't significantly change our ways. I would like to think there's some fear-mongering there. I don't know how they can predict. I'd like to hope we have more than 60, but I think that the point is, it's a sense of urgency. If you look at the increase of 3,000% in those diseases, that's not sustainable. So we have to make changes. And I'd like to believe that your listeners are really got a leg up on this and they're clued in and they're doing some of those things. And that's why they're listening to you, is because you're giving them that insight, and collectively you share ideas, and we are today. And we can share those ideas and learn and really there is a sense of urgency to this. But Gabe Brown is one of the main characters in that with his farm, and he shows how he converted from farming chemically to moving to more of an organic or regenerative approach, and it's working. And he's going all over the world speaking and talking to other farmers, and that's part of his revenue stream now, is doing that, and they're doing really well.
So as a non-farmer myself and a very poor gardener, what are some actions that just people in the stores, people at our kitchen tables can take to help promote regenerative farming, promote this shift? Because yes, I, like you, would like to hope that we have far more than 60 harvests, but even more, I'd like to hope that we make the change, that we get back, that those minerals and the nutrients in the vegetables. Are there action steps we can take at home?
I think that the closer to the source, if you can grow it yourself, you can treat the soil right. Those are, ideal in the perfect scenario. And I would be teaching every child how to grow a garden, and they'll eat more vegetables if they get to be a part of the growing process of it. They may never eat a carrot or a tomato or something. They've decided they don't like it, but if they got to help plant it and nurture it and take care of it and then harvest it and then help cook it. And how fun is it to cook with mom or dad or somebody or friends, cooking as friends together? You're going to love it. And they help do that. And when they're part of that process, they're going to like things that you wouldn't get them to eat on your best day. But I think that if you can support the local farmers market, would be a plan B. But look, there's some research out there that says that every day that a vegetable is harvested, it loses 10% of its nutritional value. So when you think about the traditional distribution as we know it today, where product is coming in some cases from third world countries because the labor is cheaper, they're growing it there, they're shipping it, and they can truck it in. And let's say it comes from Mexico and it comes across and it's now in Michigan or Ohio or New York or Chicago, and then it goes to a distributor and then it goes to a grocery store. You're looking at 2 weeks old. It looks okay when you go to the grocery store. And then that's why when we put it in the refrigerator, it looked okay when we bought it at the store. But then you put it in and like the weekend's gone and like you're starting to get serious about cooking for the week and the stuff's already breaking down. Well, the nutritional levels are broken down too. Anytime we can get the product closer to the source, know thy grower is one of our things. Know who grew that. Go to the farmers markets, talk to the farmers. How did they grow it? If they're not passionate about telling you about how they're growing and the steps that they're taking, you may want to move on down the line and talk to another one and have some conversations. If we're doing this sort of thing, we want to talk about it. We're excited about it because we know that it's making a difference. And we need to connect up with people like you and your listeners every day because we've got a big mountain to move, but we can do this.
And I love that you are just everywhere, Farmer Lee. I hear that you are starting a new show with Rachael Ray called The Chef's Garden about, you started with connecting with those chefs, creating the special taste sensations. But where did this show with Rachael Ray come from?
In the middle of COVID, a lot of us felt helpless to help. Rachael Ray knew that we were doing the home delivery, and she would call at times and give us a list of 100 people to send boxes out to. She's one of the most kind, generous, loving people that I've ever met. She has a heart as big as a bushel basket. And she would send us a list of customers and give us her credit card, and we would send these boxes out to people, and it would blow them away. And in some cases, maybe they really needed a box of vegetables. Maybe they just needed to know that somebody else loved them and cared about them and cared that they got through this on the other side. Whatever the reason, she was supporting the farm by doing this, and her generosity knows no bounds. But through that, she was filming from home instead of in ABC at the time. She was affiliated with ABC, and her and her husband, John, were filming from home. They built a studio there, and she invited me, much like we're doing today. And we filmed with her on ABC right here from the farm. And I was talking to her, and we were going back and forth, and we did live shows on ABC. And she loved the chemistry that we had. I had never met her before. I had sent her a nice letter thanking her for the support during COVID for buying the boxes. And it was a very heartfelt note, and that resonated with her. And that began more of a personal relationship. Obviously, we all knew of, her stardom and who she was. And we had sent product to her company before, but I never really had a personal relationship with her before that. And then I think that she parted company with ABC after a while. But before that, she flew us to Italy. We filmed with her in Italy for ABC. And then she has her own production company. And she went and negotiated a deal with, I think, A&E. I can't speak on behalf of her, and she said, I sold 20 shows to them. And she's doing all kinds of shows now. And she said, by the way, one of the shows is yours, and my production company's going to film it. You need to come up with a name. And of course, I knew immediately that we were going to name it The Chef's Garden. So the idea really stemmed. Matthew, could you hand me one of our, I can get one right here. Never mind. You don't even have to get up. During COVID, one of our projects on the side, and people will ask us, how long did it take to do the book? Now, this is not something you're going to put in your back pocket and carry to the farmer's market. But I will guarantee that whatever you find at the farmer's market will be in the book when you get back. 637 pages.
Holy cow.
And 100 recipes. And Chef Jamie Simpson, who's our chef liaison at the Culinary Vegetable Institute, and his team did 100 recipes during about a 3-year period. So if you were to ask Chef Jamie Simpson, how long did it take the book, he would say about 2.5 to 3 years. If you ask me or my brother Bob, we would say 40 years of mistakes and stupidity, and hopefully a couple of things that turned out successful. But the book is, I think, the impetus for the show. And that's why I tied the book in. Rachel really liked the idea. Look, butternut squash, right? Our moms always cooked it. You cook it. We cut it in half. We bake it at 375 for 45 minutes with a little brown sugar and butter or whatever we put on it, maybe some sausage. And we do it 3 times a year, and we're done with the butternut for the year. In the book, Chef Jamie shows the diversity in a single ingredient. Have you ever had a butternut ice cream? It'll blow your mind.
No, I've used it in muffins and pancakes, but not ice cream.
How exciting to think about the diversity. What about a butternut chip? What about a butternut soup? What about parts of the plant that we've never considered before? Looking at that plant, we don't like waste. We've all seen the shows or the commercials that talk about 40% food waste in America. We think that's underrated. But let's talk about a Brussels sprout. Have you ever seen a Brussels sprout grow?
Yes, the long stalk.
Long stalk.
Lots of little balls.
I'm sure that some of your gardening listeners have not only seen them, but they've probably grown them. But it takes about 8 or 9 months. And it's this long stalk and these beautiful leaves. I think it's one of the most beautiful and majestic plants. It's so amazing. But we pick off the Brussels sprout, and all this energy, all this love, all these nutrients have gone to produce this amazing stalk and these leaves. So think about this. I would be willing to bet you lunch, not the farm, that I could blindfold you and have you taste collard greens and Brussels sprout leaves, and you would not be able to tell the difference. They're in the cruciferous family, right? Cabbage, the Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cauliflowers, okay? Why are we wasting that? So you can use the Brussels sprout leaf. We can reduce the waste. It's about looking at that plant in its entirety. You know, for years, and it goes back to in Europe, a lot of the countries are hundreds of years old. We're young in the USA, right? But at some point in those countries' survival, they had to learn to eat every part of an animal. And the poorer you were, the worse parts of the animal that you got. You couldn't afford the good cuts. So you learned how to take the head of an ox, or you learned to get the ox tail, or the pig's feet, or the chicken's feet. Some of those things that some of us look at and say, oh, that sounds terrible. But they learned to make those good because they needed to feed their families and make a soup or do whatever they had to do for survival. And today, chefs take on the idea of from tail to snout as respect and reverence. If you're going to kill an animal, if a life is going to give up its life for the subsistence of mankind, then the least that we should do is to respect that animal and use all of it. But why can't we do the same thing with a plant? And we want people to look at the plant and the earth in the same way of respecting the earth and respecting the plant and utilizing all of that. And don't waste anything. Even the trimmings can make a good stock. Whatever you have, there's no reason not to utilize all of that plant.
It's amazing. I saw a little bit of Rachael Ray and you and Chef Jamie in Italy and making rigatoni from, was it the zucchini plant stems?
Yes, amazing.
Dying to taste that. I can't even picture what it would be like.
It's fantastic.
I love it. You know, if you are increasing the nutrient value of all of these vegetables and your soil back up, 150, 300 times the average, congratulations, by the way, gold stars, blue ribbons all around. Obviously, people are going to get healthier. And I did notice on your website a lot of connections with functional medicine, which makes so much sense. If we're treating the earth holistically with regenerative farming, of course, we're going to look at human bodies holistically with functional medicine. Can you tell us a little about how you've connected with functional medicine doctors and what they love about the way you grow your food?
Well, interestingly enough, going to the vegetable conferences where people that grow vegetables come together to learn and to hear speakers and to study and to try and improve, we're seeing some of these doctors showing up at some of these conferences, and they're finally making a connection. We've had many doctors that have said, look, we studied very little about nutrition when we went to doctor school, whether it was 9 years or 10 years or 11 years. It was always about treating the symptom. Here's the chemical, here's the drug that you use. When you have this problem, you use chemo. When you have this problem, here's what you do. It's always about learning how to treat this. It's a symptom-based thing. Western culture, medicine's only been around 250 years, right? We had medicine for hundreds of years since the beginning of time before Western culture medicine. And if you look in every drug, it's plant-based. There's a plant involved in it someplace. And so some of the doctors are starting to make the connection that there are other ways. Gut health is so important. We had Dr. Will Lee here. Him and his brother have been doctors for 40 years and have been studying this. Rachael Ray brought Dr. Will Lee here. She's done several shows with him. And we were blown away by what he was sharing with us. And he was blown away by not fully understanding that. I think he made the assumption that a carrot is a carrot is a carrot is a carrot.
Oh,
And
wow.
it's simply not true. And we showed him some of the research, some of the white papers, some of the studies and the information and the facts that we had produced. And he was blown away by that. So we think that there's going to be some really exciting synergies from him. My brother is on a board with Dr. Nasha Winters out west, and they're doing more of that functional, and they see that correlation. There was a study that Dr. Will Lee presented to us that showed he had shared cases where somebody was taking chemo and they said, well, what about my weight? What should I eat? And they said, oh, it doesn't matter. Eat whatever you want. You can even eat ice cream. Just don't lose weight. And he's like pulling his hair out. You're in the fight of your life. You want to give your body all the nutrition and all the help and all the support that you can. He shared this study where it showed that, and I hate to get tied into numbers, but where somebody ate spinach while they were being treated, and it made the medicines over 1,000 times more effective.
Wow.
1,000 times more effective. So don't hold me to the numbers. I believe that it was actually higher than that, which is mind-boggling to think it would be 1,000 times more effective.
Yeah.
But I think that his belief is that it doesn't have to be all or one. It doesn't have to be completely holistic, or it doesn't have to be completely Western culture, that the two can actually work together to strengthen. But it's really exciting to see that doctors are recognizing that there's some middle ground there that can really be helpful.
That food matters to our health should be clear. It's not always clear, but I love that you even go one layer deeper, that it's the quality of the food based on the quality of the soil that can really supercharge health. So I'm so excited about what you do. I love your energy and excitement. And Farmer Lee, I just want to end with a message of hope for parents. If you can encourage parents in one way, what do you want them to remember?
Every single day we get an opportunity to start over. There is a greater source out there. He will carry our problems. Don't try and carry it all on yourself. Do everything you can to teach your children about food. It's such an integral part of our lives every single day. We can make it fun. It doesn't have to be medicine. I know Hippocrates said, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. Let food be your health. And it's an opportunity to be able to sit down. I believe that cooking together and eating together can be such a wonderful thing in so many levels. Food really is such a nice conduit for life. Eat the rainbow. Try and get that diversity in and get as much color, natural color, into the diet as possible.
Farmer Lee, what a delightful interview with so much encouragement, and what a beautiful end. Listeners, go out there and buy the book, The Chef's Garden. Watch the show, The Chef's Garden. It's on A&E. It just premiered January 27th, 2025. Connect with The Chef's Garden. You can get boxes of their vegetables at your house, that ice spinach, like we heard it. Now we got to taste it. We got to see what it's like. Did I miss anything, anywhere to connect with you?
Instagram, Farmer Lee Jones. I'm Farmer Lee Jones. If you see me today, you've seen me tomorrow. I have 18 pairs of overalls, 18 white shirts, and 18 red bow ties. There's an old farm saying that you can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear, so I might as well just go as a farmer. I'll be leaving at 5:30 in the morning for New York City, and I'll have overalls and a white shirt and a red bow tie on, and back on Sunday. But Instagram, Farmer Lee Jones, or The Chef's Garden. We would love to see what you create with your dishes at home, and share them with us. We'd be delighted to see what you do. Stay in touch with us. And thank you so much. Keep doing the good work you're doing. We believe in you. We believe in your cause. And we think that you're doing some amazing work. And we'd be delighted to come back on anytime.
Well, thank you, Farmer Lee Jones, here at the Healthy Parenting Handbook. We are always so happy to talk about food and children and our health and just getting them all together. Let's get the kids out in the dirt. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Healthy Parenting Handbook podcast. I hope your brain feels fed and your heart feels full, and that you feel connected, knowing that there are other parents on this journey with you. We're just trying to raise healthy, independent adults. And the next time you think, man, there is no handbook for this job, Now there is the Healthy Parenting Handbook. Look up the podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. Please leave a review, my friends, as that helps other parents who need this information to find us. And of course, subscribe. That's a huge help. You can also look for our shorts as a reel on Instagram at Katie Kimball Kids Cook, or subscribe to the Healthy Parenting Handbook Shorts channel on YouTube. You'll get those bite-sized portions of healthy parenting advice.